South Dakota is a small state, but it's a very patriotic state. Aside from all the agriculture and farming, all of the hunting, the beautiful national parks, from Mount Rushmore to the reservations to Crazy Horse, all the way over to Rapid City, we celebrate our men and women who served in the military. Our capital city, Pierre, has a beautiful lake called Capitol Lake right in front of our Capitol building, and it's a memorial for the men and women who died World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It's also the same place I got married. It's a special place to me. We've dedicated and built beautiful memorials for our hometown heroes, and also celebrate the men and women who received the Medal of Honor and paid the ultimate price. Medal of Honor recipient or not, the Marine Corps is known for traditions, honor, and high standards. In the Marine hymn, they say, "We fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea." Joe Foss definitely defended his country in the air, shooting down 26-0 Japanese fighters during one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific at the Guadalcanal. He would go on to serve in the Air National Guard, become the 20th governor of the state of South Dakota, and the first commissioner of the National Football League. Joe Foss was born in an unelectrified farmhouse near Sioux Falls, South Dakota on April 27, 1915. One of his fondest memories he speaks of is with the age of 12, he'd gone to an airfield in Renner to see Charles Lindbergh on tour with his aircraft, the Spirit of St. Louis. 4 years later, he and his father paid $1.50 apiece to take their first aircraft ride in the Ford trim motor at the Black Hills Airport with the famed South Dakota aviator, Clyde Ice. This played a huge impact in his life, and from this moment on, he knew aviation was where he wanted to be. March 1933, while coming back from the fields during a storm, his father was killed when he drove over a downed electrical cable and was electrocuted to death as he stepped out of the car. Foss, not 18 yet, pitched in with his mother and brother to continue running the family farm. Farming was made difficult by the dust storms of the Great Depression over the next 2 years, and it took its toll on the crops and livestock. Foss was still determined to be an aviator, and he would do whatever it took at this point to get back into it. After watching a Marine Corps aerial team led by Captain Clayton Jerome perform acrobatics in an open cockpit of biplanes, he was determined to become a Marine aviator. Foss worked at a service station to pay for books and college tuition and began flight lessons from Leroy Landing at the Sioux Falls Skyway Airfield in 1938, scraping up $65 to pay for his tuition. His younger brother took over management of the farm, which allowed Foss to go to school and graduate from Washington High School in Sioux Falls. While at USD, Foss and other like-minded students convinced authorities to set up a CAA flying course at the university. He built 100 flight hours by graduation time, paid his way through the university by busting tables, joined the fraternity, the Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity, and excelled in sports for University South Dakota, fighting on the college boxing team, participating as a member of the track team, and as a second-string guard on the football team. In 1940, Foss hitchhiked to Minneapolis to enlist in the Marine Corps Reserves in order to join the Naval Aviation Cadet Program to become a naval aviator. Once he was accepted by the Marine Corps Flight School and received his commission, after graduation from flight school in Pensacola, Florida, he was designated a naval aviator and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. He was then assigned as a plowback instructor at Pensacola, teaching Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard students to be naval aviators. At 27 years of age, he was considered too old to be a fighter pilot. He was transferred to Marine Photographic Squadron, stationed at Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego, California. Not satisfied with his role, Foss made repeated requests to be transferred to a fighter qualification program. He checked out in the Grumman F-4F Wildcats while still assigned to the VMO-1, logging over 150 flight hours in June and July of 1942. He was eventually transferred to Marine Fighting Squadron VMF-121 as the executive officer while stateside. In the beginning of the 1900s, either the Great War, World War I, or World War II, combat and aviation were still fairly new. The planes were a little bit crude, they weren't as fast, they weren't able to fly as far. But here's some of the planes that the Marine Corps had when they were over the Pacific Ocean in the theater against Japan. The plane that always stood out to me, most common, was the Grumman F-4F Wildcat. They went into service in 1940. They were manufactured by GM Eastern Aircraft Division. There were 7,885 produced. They had a top speed of 318 miles an hour. The Wildcats had a ZB homing device, which allowed them to find carriers in poor visibility. The F-4 Wildcat had two 50 caliber machine guns, also capable of carrying smaller ordnance for bombing. After the attack on Pearl Harbor on the island of Oahu, the United States declared open warfare on Japan. In 1942, VMF 121 pilots and aircraft were sent to the Guadalcanal as part of Operation Watchtower to relieve VMF 223, which had been fighting for control of the air over the island since mid-August. On October 9th, Foss and his group were catapult launched off the USS Kopi escort carrier and flew 350 miles north to reach the Guadalcanal. The air group, codenamed Cactus, based at Henderson Field, became known as Cactus Air Force, and their presence played a pivotal role in the Battle of the Guadalcanal. Foss soon gained a reputation for aggressive close-in fighter tactics and uncanny gunnery skills. Foss shot down a Japanese Zero on his first combat mission October 13th, but his own F-4F Wildcat was shot up as well, and with a dead engine and 3 more Zeros on his tail, he landed at full speed with no flaps, minimal control on Henderson Field, barely missing a grove of palm trees. In 1942, the Marines held down the Guadalcanal. 7th Regiment, with famous Marine Chesty Puller leading the 1-7, Havoc, 2-7 Marines, doing amphibious assault. And in the air, you had Foss and what were known as Foss's Flying Circus, controlling the air. Foss's group of pilots shot down 72 Japanese Zero Mitsubishi planes. 26 were credited to him. The Marines had moved in with speed, held it down until Big Army, and the Royal Air Force from the United Kingdom was able to move in, help hold it. Foss would end up being shot down 2 more times, crashing into the ocean, and able to swim to shore to safety both times. Foss returned to the United States in March 1943, and then on May 18th, he received the Medal of Honor from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The White House ceremony was featured in Life magazine, with the reluctant Captain Foss appearing on the magazine's cover. He then was asked to participate in a war bond tour that stretched into 1944. In February of 1944, Foss returned to the Pacific Theater to lead the VMF 115th, flying the F-4U Corsair. Based in the combat zone around Amuro, St. Matthias Group in 44. It was during this second tour that Foss met and became friends with fellow Marine fighter Ace Marion Carl. He also had an opportunity to meet and fly with his boyhood idol, Charles Lindbergh, who was on assignment touring the South Pacific as an aviation consultant. Foss contracted malaria and was sent home to Klamath Falls, Oregon Rehabilitation Center. In 1945, he became the operations and training officer at the Marine Corps Air Station Santa Barbara, California. August of 1945, Foss was released to inactive duty and opened Joe Foss Flying Service Charter, Flying Service and Flight Instruction School in Sioux Falls. December of 1945, it was retained in the Marine Corps on reserve and inactive duty until 1947. Also in 1946, Foss was appointed a lieutenant colonel, instructed to form the South Dakota Air National Guard, becoming the commanding officer of the 175th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, even becoming a member of the P-51 Mustang Air Demonstration Team. During the Korean War, Foss moved up to colonel, was called to active duty in the United States Air Force, relinquishing command of the 175th Squadron, and served as Director of Operations and Training of Central Air Defense Command. He eventually reached the rank of Brigadier General. Foss would go on and continue a life with many successful. Ran for governor of South Dakota in 1955 and was elected the state's youngest governor. He was the American Football League first commissioner. He was the president of the National Rifle Association. He'd also founded the Joe Foss Institute. Foss was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 1984 and was also president and board chairman of the Air Force Association and as a director of the United States Air Force Academy. And in October of 2002, Foss suffered a stroke, died 3 months later on New Year's Day. In 2003, never having regained consciousness in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he and his wife had made their home in his later years. Actor Charlton Heston gave a brief tribute to his old friend. Foss was buried at Arlington National Cemetery on January 21st of 2003.